It is a most tragic story, I cried. But why have you not carried out his wishes? Erskine shrugged his shoulders. Because it is a perfectly unsound theory from beginning to end, he answered. My dear Erskine, I exclaimed, getting up from my seat, you are entirely wrong about the whole matter. It is the only perfect key to Shakespeare's sonnets that has ever been made. It is complete in every detail. I believe in Willie Hughes. Don't say that, said Erskine gravely. I believe there is something fatal about the idea, and intellectually there is nothing to be said for it. I have gone into the whole matter, and I assure you the theory is entirely fallacious. It is plausible up to a certain point, then it stops. For heaven's sake, my dear boy, don't take up the subject of Willie Hughes. You will break your heart over it. Erskine, I answered, it is your duty to give this theory to the world. If you will not do it, I will. By keeping it back, you wrong the memory of Cyril Graham, the youngest and the most splendid of all the martyrs of literature. I entreat you to do him this bare act of justice. He died for this thing. Don't let his death be in vain. Erskine looked at me in amazement. You are carried away by the sentiment of the whole story, he said. You forget that a thing is not necessarily true because a man died for it. I was devoted to Cyril Graham. His death was a horrible blow to me. I did not recover from it for years. I don't think I have ever recovered from it. But Willie Hughes, there is nothing in the idea of Willie Hughes. No such person ever existed. As for bringing the matter to the world thinks that Cyril Graham shot himself by accident. The only proof of his suicide was contained in the letter to me, and of this letter the public never heard anything. To the present day, Lord Crediton is under the impression that the whole thing was accidental. Cyril Graham sacrificed his life to a great idea, I answered. And if you will not tell of his martyrdom, tell at least of his faith. His faith, said Erskine, was fixed in a thing that was false, in a thing that was unsound, in a thing that no Shakespearean scholar would accept for a moment. The theory would be laughed at. Don't make a fool of yourself, and don't follow a trail that leads nowhere. You start by assuming the existence of the very person whose existence is the thing to be proved. Besides, everybody knows that the sonnets were addressed to Lord Pembroke. The matter is settled once and for all. The matter is not settled, I exclaimed. I will take up the theory where Cyril Graham left it, and I will prove to the world that he was right. Silly boy, said Erskine, go home, it is after 3. And don't think about Willie Hughes any more. I am sorry I told you anything about it, and very sorry indeed that I should have converted you to a thing in which I don't believe. You have given me the key to the greatest mystery of modern literature, I answered, and I will not rest till I have made you recognize, till I have made everybody recognize, that Cyril Graham was the most subtle Shakespearean critic of our day. I was about to leave the room when Erskine called me back. My dear fellow, he said, let me advise you not to waste your time over the sonnet. I am quite serious. After all, what do they tell us about Shakespeare? Simply that he was the slave of beauty. Well, that is the condition of being an artist, I replied. There was a strange silence for a few moments. Then Erskine got up and, looking at me with half-crossed eyes, said, Ah, how you remind me of Cyril. He used to say just that sort of thing to me. He tried to smile, but there was a note of poignant pathos in his voice that I remember to the present day as one remembers the tone of a particular violin that has charmed one, the touch of a particular woman's hand. The great events of life often leave one unmoved. They pass out of consciousness, and when one thinks of them, become unreal. Even the scarlet flowers of passion seem to grow in the same meadow as the poppies of oblivion. We regret the burden of their memory, and have anodynes against them. But the little things, the things of no moment, remain with us. In some tiny ivory cell, the brain stores the most delicate and the most fleeting impressions. As I walked home through St. James's Park, the dawn was just breaking over London. The swans were lying asleep on the smooth surface of the polished lake, like white feathers fallen upon a mirror of black steel. The gaunt palace looked purple against the pale green sky, and in the garden of Stafford House the birds were just beginning to sing. I thought of Cyril Graham, and my eyes filled with tears. It was past 12 when I awoke, and the sun was streaming in through the curtains of my room in long dusty beams of tremulous gold. I told my servant that I would not be at home to anyone, and after I had discussed a cup of chocolate and petit pain, I took out of the library my copy of Shakespeare's sonnets and Mr. Tyler's facsimile edition of the quarto, and began to go carefully through them. Each poem seemed to me to corroborate Cyril Graham's theory. I felt as if I had my hand upon Shakespeare's heart, and was counting each separate throb and pulse of passion. I thought of the wonderful boy actor, and saw his face in every line. Previous to this, in my Lord Pembroke days, if I may so term them, I must admit that it always seemed to me very difficult to understand how the creator of Hamlet and Lear and Othello could have addressed in such extravagant terms of praise and passion one who was merely an ordinary young nobleman of the day. Along with most students of Shakespeare, I had found myself compelled to set the sonnets apart as things quite alien to Shakespeare's development as a dramatist, as things possibly unworthy of the spears of the intellectual side of his nature. But now that I began to realize the truth of Cyril Graham's theory, I saw that the moods and passions they mirrored were absolutely essential to Shakespeare's perfection as an artist, writing for the Elizabethan stage, and that it was in the curious theatric conditions of that stage that the plays themselves had their origin. I remember what joy I had in feeling that these wonderful sonnets, subtle as a sphinx, as sweet and musical as bright Apollo's lute strung with his hair, were no longer isolated from the great aesthetic energies of Shakespeare's life, but were an essential part of his dramatic activity, and revealed to us something of the secret of his method. To have discovered the true name of Mr. W.H was comparatively nothing. Others might have done that, had perhaps done it, but to have discovered his profession was a revolution in criticism. Two sonnets, I remember, struck me particularly. In the first of these, L.I.I.I. Shakespeare complimenting Willie Hughes on the versatility of his acting, on his wide range of parts, a range extending, as we know, from Rosalind to Juliet, from Beatrice to Ophelia, says to him, "What is your substance? Whereof are you made, that millions of strange shadows on you tend? since every one hath every one shade, and you but one can every shadow lend. Lines that would be unintelligible if they were not addressed to an actor, for the word shadow had in Shakespeare's day a technical meaning connected with the stage. The best in this kind are but shadows, says Theseus of the actors in Midsummer's Night Dream. Life's but a walking shadow, a poor player that struts and frets his hour upon the stage, cries Macbeth in the moment of his despair. And there are many similar allusions in the literature of the day. This sonnet evidently belonged to the series in which Shakespeare discusses the nature of the actor's art and of the strange and rare temperament that is essential to the perfect stage player. "How is it," says Shakespeare to Willie Hughes, "that you have so many personalities?" And then he goes on to point out that his beauty is such that it seems to realize every form and phase of fancy, to embody each dream of the creative imagination, an idea that is still further expanded in the sonnet that immediately follows, where, beginning with the fine thought, "Oh, how much more doth beauty beauteous seem by that sweet ornament which truth doth give," Shakespeare invites us to notice how the truth of acting, the truth of visible presentation on the stage, adds to the wonder of poetry, giving life to its loveliness and actual reality to its ideal form. And yet in sonnet LXVII, Shakespeare calls upon Willie Hughes to abandon the stage with its artificiality, its unreal life of painted face and mimic costume, its immoral influences and suggestions, its remoteness from the true world of noble action and sincere utterance. Ah, wherefore with infection should he live, and with his presence grace and piety, that sin by him advantage should receive and lace itself with his society? Why should false painting imitate his cheek, and steal seeing of his living hue? Why should poor beauty indirectly seek roses of shadow, since his rose is true? It may seem strange that so great a dramatist as Shakespeare, who realized his own perfection as an artist, and his full humanity as a man on the ideal plane of staging and stage playing, should have written in these terms about the theater. But we must remember that in sonnets CX and CXI, Shakespeare shows us that he too was wearied of the world of puppets, and full of shame at having made himself a motley to the view. Sonnet CXI is especially bitter. "Oh, for my sake, do you with fortune chide the guilty goddess of my harmful deeds, that did not better for my life provide than public means which public manners breeds. Thence comes it that my name receives a brand, and almost thence my nature is subdued to what it works in, like the dyer's hand. Pity me then, and wish I were renewed." And there are many signs of the same feeling elsewhere, signs familiar to all real students of Shakespeare. One point puzzled me immensely as I read the sonnets, and it was days before I struck on the true interpretation, which indeed Cyril Graham himself seemed to have missed. I could not understand how it was that Shakespeare set so high a value on his young friend marrying. He himself had married young, and the result had been unhappiness, and it was not likely that he would have asked Willie Hughes to commit the same error. The boy player of Rosalind had nothing to gain from marriage, or from the passions of real life. The early sonnets, with their strange entreaties to have children, seemed to be a jarring note. The explanation of the mystery came on me quite suddenly, and I found it in the curious dedication. It will be remembered that this dedication was as follows: To the only begetter of these ensuing sonnets, Mr. W.H. All happiness, and that eternity promised by our ever-living poet, wisheth the well-wishing adventurer in setting forth T.T. Some scholars have supposed that the word begetter here means simply the procurer of the sonnets for Thomas Thorpe, the publisher, but this view is now generally abandoned, and the highest authorities are quite agreed that it is to be taken in the sense of inspirer, the metaphor being drawn from the analogy of physical life. Now I saw that the same metaphor was used by Shakespeare himself all through the poems, and this set me on the right track. Finally, I made my great discovery. The marriage that Shakespeare proposes for Willie Hughes is the marriage with his muse, an expression which is definitely put forward in sonnet LXXXII, where, in the bitterness of his heart at the defection of the boy for whom he had written his greatest parts, and whose beauty had indeed suggested them, he opens his complaint by saying, I grant thou art not married to my muse. The children he begs him to beget are no children of flesh and blood, but more immortal children of undying fame. The whole cycle of the early sonnets is simply Shakespeare's invitation to Willie Hughes to go upon the stage and become a player. How barren and profitless a thing, he says, is this beauty of yours if it be not used. When 40 winters shall besiege thy brow, and dig deep trenches in thy beauty's field, thy youth's proud livery, so gazed on now, will be a tattered weed, of small worth held. Then being asked where all thy beauty lies, where all the treasure of thy lusty days, to say within thine own deep sunken eyes were an all-eating shame and thriftless praise. You must create something in art. My verse is thine and born of thee. Only listen to me, and I will bring forth eternal numbers to outlive long date. And you shall people with forms of your own image, the imaginary world of the stage. These children that you beget, he continues, will not wither away as mortal children do, but you shall live in them, and in my plays do but make thee another self for love of me, that beauty still may live in thine or thee. Be not afraid to surrender your personality, to give your semblance to some other. To give away yourself keeps yourself still, and you must live drawn by your own sweet skill. I may not be learned in astrology, and yet in those constant stars your eyes I read such art as truth and beauty shall together thrive. If from thyself to store thou wouldst convert, what does it matter about others? Let those whom nature hath not made for store, harsh, featureless, and rude, barrenly perish. With you it is different. Nature carved thee for her seal, and meant thereby thou shouldst print more, nor let that copy die. Remember too how soon beauty forsakes itself. Its action is no stronger than a flower. and like a flower it lives and dies. Think of the stormy gusts of winter's day, of the barren edge of death's eternal cold, and ere thou be distilled, make some sweet vial. Treasure thou some place with beauty's treasure, ere it be self-killed. Why, even flowers do not altogether die. When roses wither, of their sweet deaths are sweetest odors made. And you, who are my rose, should not pass away without leaving your form in art, for art has the very secret of joy. 10 times thyself were happier than that, if 10 of thine 10 times refigured thee. You do not require the bastard signs of fair, the painted face, the fantastic disguises of other actors. The golden tresses of the dead, the rite of sepulchres, need not be shorn away for you. In you those holy hours are seen, without all ornament, itself and true, making no summer of another's green. All that is necessary is to copy what in you is writ, to place you on the stage as you are in actual life. All those ancient poets who have written of ladies dead and lovely knights have been dreaming of one, such a one as you, and all their praises are but prophecies of this our time, all you prefiguring. For your beauty seems to belong to all ages and to all lands. Your shade comes to visit me at night, but I want to look upon your shadow in the living day. I want to see you upon the stage. Mere description of you will not suffice. If I could write the beauty of your eyes, and in fresh numbers number all your graces, the age to come would say, this poet lies. Such heavenly touches ne'er touched earthly faces. Is it necessary that some child of yours, some artistic creation that embodies you and to which your imagination gives life, shall present you to the world's wondering eyes? Your own thoughts are your children, offspring of sense and spirit. Give some expression to them, and you shall find those children nursed, delivered from thy brain. My thoughts also are my children. They are of your begetting, and my brain is the womb wherein they grew. For this great friendship of ours is indeed a marriage. It is the marriage of true minds. I collected together all the passages that seemed to me to corroborate this view, and they produced a strong impression on me, and showed me how complete Cyril Graham's theory really was. I also saw that it was quite easy to separate those lines in which Shakespeare speaks of the sonnets themselves from those in which he speaks of his great dramatic work. This was a point that had been entirely overlooked by all the critics up to Cyril Graham's day. And yet it was one of the most important in the whole series of poems. To the sonnets, Shakespeare was more or less indifferent. He did not wish to rest his fame on them. They were to him his slight muse, as he calls them, and intended, as Mears tells us, for private circulation only among a very few friends. Upon the other hand, he was extremely conscious of the high artistic value of his plays, and shows a noble reliance upon his dramatic genius. When he says to Willie Hughes, But thy eternal summer shall not fade, nor lose possession of that fair thou owest. Nor shall death brag thou wanderest in his shade, when in eternal lines to time thou growest. So long as men can eyes can see, so long lives this, and this gives life to thee. The expression eternal lines clearly alludes to one of his plays that he was sending him at the time, just as the concluding couplet points to his confidence in the probability of his plays being always acted. In his address to the dramatic muse, Sonnets C and Ci, we find the same feeling. Where art thou, muse, that thou forgetst so long to speak of that which gives thee all thy might? Spend'st thou thy fury on some worthless song, darkening thy power to lend base subjects light? He cries, and then he proceeds to reproach the mistress of tragedy and comedy for her neglect of truth and beauty died, and says, because he needs no praise wilt thou be dumb? Excuse not silence so, for 't lies in thee. To make him much outlive a gilded tomb, and to be praised of ages yet to be, then do thy office, muse, I teach thee how. To make him seem long hence as he shows now. It is, however, perhaps in Sonnet LV that Shakespeare gives to this idea its fullest expression. To imagine that the powerful rhyme of the second line refers to the sonnet itself was entirely to mistake Shakespeare's meaning. It seemed to me that it was extremely likely, from the general character of the sonnet, that a particular play was meant, and that the play was none other than Romeo and Juliet. Not marble nor the gilded monuments of princes shall outlive this powerful rhyme, but you shall shine more bright in these contents, that unswept stone besmeared with sluttish time. When wasteful wars shall statues overturn, and broils root out the work of masonry. Not Mars his sword, not war's quick fire shall burn the living record of your memory. Gainst death and all oblivious enmity shall you pace forth. Your praise shall still find room even in the eyes of all posterity that wear this world out to the ending doom. So, till the judgment that yourself arise, you live in this and dwell in lovers' eyes. It was also very suggestive to note how here, as elsewhere, Shakespeare promised Willie Hughes immortality in a form that appealed to men's eyes, that is to say, in a spectacular form, in a play that is to be looked at. For 2 weeks, I worked hard at the sonnets, hardly ever going out and refusing all invitations. Every day I seemed to be discovering something new, and Willie Hughes became to me a spiritual presence, an ever dominant personality. I could almost fancy that I saw him standing in the shadow of my room, so well had Shakespeare drawn him. With his golden hair, his tender flower-like grace, his dreamy, deep-sunken eyes, his delicate mobile limbs, and his white lily hands. His very name fascinated me. Willie Hughes, Willie Hughes. How musically it sounded. Yes, who else but he could have been the master mistress of Shakespeare's passion, the lord of his love, to whom he was bound in vassalage, the delicate minion of pleasure, the rose of the whole world, the herald of the spring, decked in the proud livery of youth. the lovely boy whom it was sweet music to hear, and whose beauty was the very raiment of Shakespeare's heart, as it was the keystone of his dramatic power. How bitter now seemed the whole tragedy of his desertion and his shame. Shame that he made sweet and lovely by the mere magic of his personality, but that was none the less shame. Yet as Shakespeare forgave him, should we not forgive him also? I did not care to pry into the mystery of his sin, or the sin, if such it was, of the great poet who had so dearly loved him. I am that I am, said Shakespeare, in a sonnet of noble scorn. I am that I am, and they that level at my abuses reckon up their own. I may be straight, though they themselves be bevel. By their rank thoughts my deeds must not be shown. Willie Hughes's abandonment of Shakespeare's theatre was a different matter, and I investigated it at great length. Finally, I came to the conclusion that Cyril Graham had been wrong in regarding the rival dramatist of sonnet LXXX as Chapman. It was obviously Marlowe who was alluded to. At the time the sonnets were written, which must have been between 1590 and 1595, such an expression as the proud full sail of his great verse could not possibly have been used of Chapman's work, however applicable it might have been to the style of his later Jacobean plays. No, Marlowe was clearly the rival poet of whom Shakespeare spoke in such laudatory terms. The hymn he wrote in Willie Hugh's honor was the unfinished Hero and Leander, and that affable familiar ghost which nightly gulls him with intelligence was the Mephistopheles of his Dr. Faustus. No doubt, Marlowe was fascinated by the beauty and grace of the boy actor, and lured him away from the Blackfriars Theatre, that he might play the Gaveston of his Edward II. That Shakespeare had some legal right to retain Willie Hughes in his own company seems evident from sonnet LXXXVII, where he says, "Farewell, thou art too dear for my possessing, and like enough thou know'st thy estimate. The charter of thy worth gives thee releasing. My bonds in thee are all determinate. For how do I hold thee but by thy granting, and for that riches where is my deserving? The cause of this gift is in me is wanting, and so my patent back again is swerving. Thyself thou gavest, thy own worth thou not knowing, or me to whom thou gavest it, else mistaking. So thy great gift, upon misprison growing, comes home again on better judgment making. Thus have I had thee as a dream doth flatter, in sleep a king, but waking no such matter. But whom he could not hold by love, he would not hold by force. Willie Hughes became a member of Lord Pembroke's company, and perhaps in the open yard of the Red Bull Tavern played the part of King Edward's delicate minion. On Marlowe's death, he seems to have returned to Shakespeare, who, whatever his fellow partners may have thought of the matter, was not slow to forgive the willfulness and treachery of the young actor. How well, too, had Shakespeare drawn the temperament of the stage player. Willie Hughes was one of those that do not do the thing they must do show, who moving others are themselves as stone. He could act love but could not feel it, could mimic passion without realizing it. In many's looks the false heart's history is written the moods and frowns and wrinkles strange. But with Willie Hughes it was not so. Heaven, says Shakespeare in a sonnet of mad idolatry, heaven in thy creation did decree that in thy face sweet love should ever dwell. Whate'er thy thoughts or thy heart's workings be, thy looks should do nothing thence but sweetness tell. This inconsistent mind and his false heart, it was easy to recognize the insincerity and treachery that somehow seemed inseparable from the artistic nature, as in his love of praise, that desire for immediate recognition that characterizes all actors. And yet, more fortunate in this than other actors, Willie Hughes was to know something of immortality. Intimately connected with Shakespeare's plays, he was to live in them and by their production. Your name from hence immortal life shall have, though I once gone to all the world must die. The earth can yield me but a common grave, when you entombed in men's eyes shall lie. Your monument shall be my gentle verse, which eyes not yet created shall o'erread, and tongues to be your being shall rehearse when all the breathers of this world are dead. Nash, with his venomous tongue, had railed against Shakespeare for reposing eternity in the mouth of a player, the reference being obviously to the sonnets. But to Shakespeare, the actor was a deliberate and self-conscious fellow worker who gave form and substance to a poet's fancy and brought into drama elements of noble realism. His silence could be as eloquent as words and his gestures as expressive. And in those terrible moments of titan agony or of godlike pain, when thought outstrips utterance, when the soul, sick with excess of anguish, stammers or is dumb, and the very raiment of speech is rent and torn by passion in its storm, then the actor could become, though it were for but a moment, a creative artist, and touch by his mere presence and personality those springs of terror and of pity to which tragedy appeals. This full recognition of the actor's art, of the actor's power, was one of the things that distinguished the romantic from the classical drama, and one of the things, consequently, that we owed to Shakespeare, who, fortunate in once much, was also fortunate in this, that he was able to find Richard Burbage and to fashion Willie Hughes. With what pleasure he dwelt upon Willie Hughes' influence over his audience, the gazers as he calls them. With what charm of fancy did he analyze the whole art. Even in The Lover's Complaint he speaks of his acting, and tells us that he was a nature so impressionable to the quality of dramatic situations that he could assume all strange forms of burning blushes, or of weeping water, or swooning paleness, explaining his meaning more fully later on, where he tells us how Willie Hughes was able to deceive others by his wonderful power to blush at speeches rank, to weep at woes, or to turn white and swoon at tragic shows. It had never been pointed out before that the shepherd of this lovely pastoral, whose youth and art and youth are described with such subtlety of phrase and passion, was none other than the Mr. W.H of the sonnets. And yet there was no doubt that he was so. Not merely in personal appearance are the two lads the same, but their natures and temperaments are identical. When the false shepherd whispers to the fickle maid, "All my offences that abroad you see are errors of the blood, none of the mind, love made them not." When he says of his lovers, "Harm have I done to them, but ne'er was harmed, kept hearts in liveries, but mine own was free, and reigned commanding in his monarchy." When he tells us of the deep-brained sonnets that one of them had sent him, and cries out in boyish pride, "The broken bosoms that to me belong have emptied all their fountains in my well," it is impossible not to feel that it is Willie Hughes who is to us. Deep-brained sonnets indeed had Shakespeare brought him, jewels that to his careless eyes were but as trifles, though each several stone, with wit well blazoned, smiled or made some moan. And into the well of beauty he had emptied the fountain of his song. That in both places it was an actor who was alluded to was also clear. The betrayed nymph tells us of the false fire in her lover's cheek, or of the forced thunder of his sighs, and of his borrowed motion, of whom indeed but an actor could it be said that to him thought, characters, and words were merely art, or that to make the weeper laugh, the laugher weep, he had the dialect and different skill, catching all passions in his craft of will. The play on words in the last line is the same as that used in the punning sonnets, and is continued in the following stanza of the poem, where we are told of the youth who did in the general bosom reign of young, of old, and sexes both enchanted, that there were those who dialogued for him what he would say, asked their own wills, and made their wills obey. Yes, the rose-cheeked Adonis of the Venus poem, the false shepherd of the lover's complaint, the tender churl, the beauteous niggard of the sonnets, was none other but a young actor, and as I read through the various descriptions given of him, I saw that the love that Shakespeare bore him was as the love of a musician for some delicate instrument on which he delights to play, as a sculptor's love for some rare and exquisite material that suggests a new form of plastic beauty, a new mode of plastic expression. For all art has its medium, its material, be it that of rhythmical words, or of pleasurable color, or of sweet and subtly divided sound. And as one of the most fascinating critics of our day has pointed out, it is to the qualities inherent in each material, and special to it, that we owe the sensuous element in art, and with it all that in art is essentially artistic. What then shall we say of the material that the drama requires for its perfect presentation? What of the actor, who is the medium through which alone the drama can truly reveal itself? Surely in that strange mimicry in life by the living, which is the mode and method of theatric art, there are sensuous elements of beauty that none of the other arts possess. Looked at from one point of view, the common players of the saffron-strewn stage are art's most complete, most satisfying instruments. There is no passion in bronze, no motion in marble. The sculptor must surrender color, and the painter fullness of form. The epos changes acts into words, and music changes words into tones. It is the drama only that, to quote the fine saying of Gervinus, uses all means at once, and appealing to both eye and ear has at its disposal, and in its service form and color, tone, look, word, the swiftness of motion, the intense realism of visible action. It may be that in this very completeness of the instrument lies the secret of some weakness in the art. Those arts are happiest that employ a material remote from reality, and there is danger in the absolute identity of medium and matter. The danger of ignoble realism and unimaginative imitation. Yet Shakespeare himself was a player and wrote for players. He saw the possibilities that lay hidden in an art that up to his time had expressed itself but in bombast or in clowning. He has left us at the most perfect rules for acting that have ever been written. He created parts that can only be truly revealed to us on the stage, wrote plays that need the theater for their full realization, and we cannot marvel that he so worshipped one who was the interpreter of his vision, as he was the incarnation of his dreams.